Tell me about this, because now when you're an independent now.
Yeah.
So what does that say? That, to me, it says that you think the Republican Party is unsavable.
Unsavable. Oh, no doubt about it.
Because otherwise you would want to stay on, right, and reform it, but you think
it can't be saved.
It cannot be saved.
Things just heated up between Bill Maher and MSNBC's Joe Scarborough. Their late-night exchange took a sharp turn, with Scarborough quickly stepping back from the conversation, almost like he wanted to disappear from the moment Maher, known for speaking his mind, strongly challenged Scarborough's take on Donald Trump. He broke down the argument piece by piece, leaving little room for defense. After that, Joe seemed eager to leave, like he had somewhere urgent to be. So what exactly did Scarborough say to spark this intense response from Maher? And how did Maher fire back? Stick around. We're breaking it all down right now.
Donald Trump said that he was going to use the military and the National Guard to arrest his political opponents. He was asked if he would back off of that.
He said no.
And he said no. Yep. In fact, he doubled down. He talked about Nancy Pelosi being evil, her husband being evil, Schiff being evil, talking about arresting them. He said he was going to execute the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff because he was disloyal to him. He told another chief of staff who was a general, I wish my generals were like Hitler's general.
It's another day, and once again, heated opinions about Donald Trump are making headlines. Some commentators seem unwilling to take a balanced view of his presidency, often twisting his comments or presenting them in a way that stirs unnecessary concern. Before we get to Bill Maher's reaction, let's take a moment to examine Joe Scarborough's recent take on Trump's remarks. His commentary appears strongly one-sided, leaving out key context that might explain Trump's intentions. This kind of selective coverage doesn't give the full picture, and instead shapes the story in a particular direction. By omitting important background or reasons behind what was said, Scarborough's portrayal feels less like fair analysis and more like an effort to reinforce a negative narrative. When the full context is ignored, the result can easily mislead viewers and intensify public debate based on an incomplete version of events.
I lived through COVID. Don't tell me there wasn't misinformation.
But there's a difference between...
I lived through stupid policies based on bad information and stifled information.
But intent matters.
That's what Zuckerberg said. He said they were forcing us not to put out...
There's a growing argument that many of the criticisms aimed at Donald Trump actually reflect the actions of his critics themselves. As Bill Maher noted, some of the same people accusing Trump of spreading misinformation have been involved in questionable reporting themselves, particularly on networks like MSNBC. Need examples? There's been controversy around the coverage of Russian collusion, the Hunter Biden laptop story, and the repeated references to the fine people narrative. These stories, often shared with certainty, were later shown to be far more complicated than initially presented. The bigger concern is not just the coverage itself, but how mistakes made by media outlets are often overlooked or quietly brushed aside, while Trump's every word is picked apart and criticized. When politicians or commentators on the left make inaccurate claims, there's rarely the same level of scrutiny or outrage. This uneven treatment creates a powerful messaging strategy, keeping audiences focused on Trump's faults while downplaying or ignoring similar issues on the other side. Admitting to these mistakes would mean acknowledging that no one has a monopoly on truth. And that's a difficult position for many to accept.
You haven't changed, so you consider yourself a liberal, right?
I consider myself an old school liberal. You have to make that distinction now because, you know, the word woke, which started out as a good thing, being alert to injustice, and a lot of people get triggered by the word because when they hear it, they think of it the old meaning, which was good.
Right.
You know, stay woke. But I'm sorry, language is a living, breathing entity. Words change and they migrate and they take on a different meaning. And woke now has to answer for, or for people have just used the word to ascribe a number of extreme things on the left.
This is where I have to respectfully disagree with Bill Maher. He suggests that only a small group on the left has embraced extreme political correctness, but that doesn't quite reflect the broader reality. What was once seen as a fringe viewpoint has now become more mainstream, especially in political, media, and entertainment circles. This approach isn't just a passing phase. It seems to have become a common framework for how many liberal voices operate today. As for Joe Scarborough, he didn't offer much of a counterpoint, perhaps because he recognized that Maher made a valid observation. The bigger question now is, how long can commentators like Scarborough continue to overlook this shift, especially when it's playing such a visible role in public discourse?
I mean, Kamala's big, I think, challenge here to win over the undecided voters is to convince them that she's not part of what they suspect she might be, sort of a stealth version of the worst excesses of the left. I said there's a coalition of Trump voters, people who really like him. They certainly are those. And then there's people who don't necessarily like him that much, but they still think he's less crazy than stuff that strikes them as aggressively anti-common sense.
Right.
That takes place on the left.
Right. So
that's why they keep running that ad about sex changes in prison. You know, like, could you...
And every football game.
Could you get every foot... That's right.
It would be difficult for Vice President Kamala Harris to distance herself from today's progressive politics, even if she tried. She's not standing on the sidelines of the movement. She's a prominent part of it. What's some call wokeness is no longer a small group of voices. It has become a central part of the broader left-leaning platform. Take a look at her campaign. The support she received didn't come from moderate Democrats pushing back on progressive trends. It came from those who fully embraced them. She had the backing of major Hollywood figures, received glowing media coverage, and was rarely pressed with tough questions. This isn't the influence of a small fringe group. It reflects the priorities of a well-established political and media network. At this point, it's clear that these ideas have become mainstream within the Democratic Party, not just a side movement. So it may be time to stop treating this shift as something marginal. It's become the norm.
You have to, on the one hand, understand you benefited from racism if you're white. There's no doubt about it. And that has to be addressed. It can't be ignored.
Right.
But also, I didn't personally do it. There's a middle ground there. It's very difficult.
Two things can be true at one time.
And they are both true at one time.
Right.
I'm not personally responsible, but did I benefit? Yes, I'm sure I did. People our age definitely did.
Right.
And so, if we can all agree on things like that, we could then come up with sensible policy.
Well, Onium. This point, I agree with Bill Maher. If we want to heal the growing divide in this country, we need to return to common sense and balance. The government should focus on real solutions that address our biggest challenges without favoring one group or pushing others away. That means setting aside symbolic politics and working toward practical results that benefit everyone. Take racism, for example. It's a serious and complex issue that deserves thoughtful, step-by-step solutions. Quick fixes or broad policies that look good on the surface often miss the mark and can even create more problems in the long run. Programs like DEI were introduced with the goal of promoting fairness. But in practice, some of these efforts have had unintended side effects, including disruptions in the workplace and concerns about public safety. When ideology starts to outweigh practical thinking, the results often fall short for everyone involved. If we can't refocus on results-driven leadership, this divide will only deepen, and meaningful progress will continue to stall.
But sometimes on the left, they don't want to acknowledge progress because it interferes with virtue signaling.
Right.
To say, we've come a long way, which we have.
It's okay to say that.
It's okay to say it,
okay.
But somehow you're a better person if you say, but there's work to be done. Of course there's work to be done. There's always work to be done. We're humans. We're on Earth. There's always going to be work to be done. But let's be realistic about where we are.
Sometimes it feels like people on the political left struggle to admit that we've made real progress. Bill Maher makes a strong point here. Acknowledging how far we've come shouldn't be controversial. Yes, there's always more work to do. That's true in any society, but it's also important to take a moment to recognize improvement when it happens. The reality is, America today isn't the same as it was in the 1960s or 70s. We've made meaningful steps forward in the fight against racism. Denying that progress doesn't help. It only creates a distorted picture of where we are as a country. Still, some public figures seem hesitant to let go of the idea that nothing has changed. For certain voices in the media, constantly highlighting division keeps their platform strong. The focus shifts away from real solutions and toward ongoing outrage, because outrage keeps viewers engaged and profits flowing. We can and should address the problems that still exist, but doing so doesn't require us to ignore the progress. That's already been made. Recognizing both truthfully is how we move forward.
I've seen focus groups over the past couple of days of Trump voters who still would support him, who say things like, I like Donald Trump because of where he stands. I can't even say it with a straight face on the issues. Now you tell me, what the does that mean? What does he, what issues? But what issues does this guy share with conservatives?
Since there seems to be confusion about why so many conservatives support Donald Trump, let's make it clear, Trump has consistently backed traditional conservative values. He's spoken out on topics like gender identity, opposing policies that allow biological men to compete in women's sports or use women's restrooms. He's also supported requiring parental permission for minors considering serious medical changes related to gender. On top of that, Trump has focused heavily on national security. Under the current administration, border security has weakened, leading to more illegal crossings and safety concerns. Trump's plan includes deporting violent offenders, tightening border policies, and closing legal loopholes that put Americans at risk. He's also pushed for government accountability. For example, he's gone after waste and mismanagement in federal agencies, including efforts to recover misused taxpayer money. His approach prioritizes transparency and smart spending, something many feel is missing in today's leadership. Whether or not you agree with him, these are the issues that matter to a lot of Americans. Ignoring these facts just because they don't fit a certain political narrative doesn't change the reality for those who care about these policies.
Tell me about this, because then when you're an independent now.
Yeah.
So what does that say? That, to me, it says that you think the Republican Party is unsavable.
Unsavable. Oh, no doubt about it.
Because otherwise you would want to stay on, right, and reform it, but you think it
can't be saved.
It cannot be saved.
At the very least, one thing is clear. Under Donald Trump's leadership, the Republican Party has made a major comeback, something no other so-called electable candidate has managed in over 20 years. And this wasn't just any win, it was decisive. The results sent a loud message. Voters are rejecting weak leadership, failed policies, and the political elite who've ignored the concerns of everyday Americans for far too long. This was more than a political victory. It was a statement. Americans stood up, rejected the status quo, and embraced a movement built around strength, accountability, and putting the country first. The silent majority has spoken, and it's clear they're not so silent anymore. So, Joe, it's time to come to terms with a new political reality. The America First agenda isn't going anywhere. And if you thought the last 4 years were tough, the next 4 may just redefine the landscape. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more. See you next time.